Beside the Palm, Season 3, Episode 6.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beside the Palm. We have a very, very special guest with us today, Howard Goodall, composer, musician extraordinaire. Howard, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. It's lovely to be with you under your palm.
Yes, I know. We were saying it's gotten quite big lately, so it's starting to sink under its own weight and just kind of getting in the way now. Yeah. So normally we start these interviews, I ask people, how long they've been at St. Luke's and how they came to be there. Your story is a little different, but I'm actually going to switch this around because people will just have watched our intro video, and I think you had something to do maybe with the theme music.
I may have done, Jim.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Well, you asked me. I can't remember if you actually asked me or if you said, how shall we do this theme music? And I said, well, I'll do one for you. Because I can think of no better gift for you and your program. I have quite a long history, kind of 40 years of writing theme tunes for TV. So I do them kind of more or less in my sleep. And I love doing them because everyone is different, including this one, this great challenge of yours to have a little bit of organ. So here in my studio with my organ and various other bits and bobs, I put this together for you. I hope it's lasted, because one of the tests of a TV theme is whether you still like it on the 10th hearing. Often they become a bit annoying. Sometimes they grow on you. The worst thing of all is it's annoying first time and it carries on being annoying.
I think it's without a doubt been the #1 single to come out of St. Luke's in a long time.
Good, I'm glad to hear that.
And we still enjoy. My mom watches these, I think, and as of a couple weeks ago, I think she said that she still will go back and rewatch the intro just because it's so fun. So I'm not sure.
It's you playing the organ as well.
What's that?
Have you told her that it's you playing the organ as well?
No. No.
It would be better if you were playing it, Jim.
I know. Well, maybe I will do that soon. That could be a special little Beside the Palm bonus release.
Yes, and when St. Luke's gets back into having regular worship with people in the room,
mm-hmm.
you can do it as one of the voluntaries.
Exactly. People would love that. So yeah, don't give me that idea.
Laid down for you, Jim.
Yeah. Well, so did you have any inspirations, or how did you go about writing that for this? Because we hadn't obviously done the show yet, so there wasn't
Well, I thought of you and your combination of a very brilliant organic playing, but also your slightly quizzical and dry humour, little dashes of acerbicness and wry smile. And I thought, what's the musical equivalent of that? There's a sort of Bachian feel in there, chunting along. I think I just thought of you. When I do it, in all seriousness, whenever I do a theme for something, it doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's a comedy or a documentary or something terribly serious or a drama. The questions you ask yourself as a writer are always the same, which is, who are the characters? What is their situation? How can I sum them up in some way that intrigues you when you're about to watch something? Because the music obviously is one of the first things you hear. And, if you're doing a comedy, whilst people say, well, when you do comedy, are you trying to be funny? Generally not. What you're trying to be is true to the characters. And that may be something that's not funny. My music for the Mr. Bean original TV programs and for the Vicar of Dibley TV series were both, the series were both very funny and rather slapstick. That in fact, I didn't do funny or slapstick music for either of them. I did a choir,
Mhm.
singing in Latin in one and singing in English in the other, Psalm 23. So I've always said that the way to do any theme is to capture the character. So basically that theme for Beside the Palm is really a sort of, it's your character, Jim, that I'm trying to evoke.
Right. Well, I love it. So I think you did a great job. I hope
Thank
others will agree. So
Thank you.
you've sort of touched on one of my other questions, so I'm going to jump ahead to that. You write for a variety of musical forces, from musicals to television themes to choral stuff. You've mentioned a couple things already. What are some things that you've done that people might be familiar with? And do you have any current projects that you want to tell us about or
Well,
can tell us about?
in rather like all the other composers in the world, the number of projects I can list right at the moment is always a smaller list than it normally is, because of the terrible pandemic, which has shut down live music and live theatre, my two main industries that I work in for live music. TV and film, as you know, are sort of stumbling back into contention right now. Trying to put things together in distanced ways and film things because they're running out of things to show. And I have as you pointed out, I do a mixture at any one time. I do a mixture of these things. So people may be aware of my Mr. Bean stuff, which I've done now for a long time, in all different mediums: animation, films, TV, whatever, stage. And also I do Johnny English, which some people may have seen, which is kind of stupid, um, 007 pastiche.
Mhm.
Various things like that in the film domain. And I do quite a lot of TV. I don't know how much of the TV here I do ends up in the States, although people with BBC America and things like this probably are more familiar with them. But here, because I'm known, the first line of my imaginary Wikipedia page, the things that are listed are nearly all comedies. People here all know my comedy themes, but actually, that's a slightly distorted view of my career, which has included a lot of other things that are not at all comedic.
Mhm.
But I'm not complaining. You're always known for the thing that the most people have heard of, and it's great that anything, if you're a composer, that anything you've done is heard of by anybody. I think we're all grateful for anything. I think, particularly grateful at the moment because all of us are falling back on, our catalogue, because there's no new pieces we write are being much heard other than in a recorded environment. So I'm aware of the fact that being 62, it's less disastrous than it would be if I were 32, and trying to make my career start off in all these, in theatre and music and TV and sacred choral music. For someone age 32, as a composer, it's really hard because I reckon it took me 8 to 10 years from the day I left college to the day I was actually supporting myself wholly from composing. That's quite a long haul.
Right.
And, obviously what many composers do is they do other things in that period, like I did as well, to support themselves. And it's one thing spending 10 years getting enough of a network and of colleagues and producers and directors who've heard of you to give you a chance and all that kind of stuff, when all this is happening. But I think it's really, really tricky for people at the beginnings of their careers, in their 20s and early 30s right now, because that whole networking thing is part of the reason you end up supporting yourself and composing, because you can't just do one thing. You actually have to do lots of musical jobs. And if you're going to be a composer and live off it, you actually probably have to do a different kind of a composing job every month. Doing just one is really hard. And for example, there are one or two people who have gone into film music at a young age and immediately got films, 10 or 12 a year. That's really rare. Mostly what people starting out do, they might do one in a year, and then a one 18 months later, and then two the year after that, etc., etc. It's a slow build. Apart from the fact that these things take a long time to do. And with the theatre and musicals, you might spend 5 years writing before it actually gets on. It takes a long time. Workshops and auditions, and development processes, and rewrites, and finding producers and showing it to them, see if they like it enough to invest in it. And all that is a long, many-year process. So if you're at the beginning of your career, you actually need lots of those things to be going on simultaneously in order that you can build it into something you can actually live off. Doing 1 or 2 things a year is not enough. That's why I feel during this COVID period where so much musical, theatrical, televisual activity has disappeared, hopefully it's temporary, but even a year or a year and a half, 2 years is pretty bad for people at the beginning of their careers. So whilst I have the worry that I may never be remembered again once we all come back and they'll have forgotten me and a new generation will come along, which is probably right in the way of things. I think for young composers, this period is very, very challenging because they can't look back and say, well, 30 years ago I did this and 20 years ago I did this. And there's a catalogue of pieces that are still being performed or heard or recorded. You know, I'm very, very aware of what a privilege and, you know, how lucky I am to be in this situation, age what I am, instead of the beginning of my career. I mean, I fear, Jim, and I don't know if it's the same in the United States, but I fear that a lot of young people who've chosen the arts as a career will now be thinking they might have to do something else altogether. It's too dangerous a period, it's too long without financial support, it's too risky. What will the landscape of theatre and music be after all this? You know, we're kind of assuming at some point there's a reset button that gets pressed and we start again where we were. But my judgment is that we're not going to start again where we were. Quite a lot will have actually been swept away that won't come back quickly. For example, in the theatre, you know, some theatres will restart as they were. Others will take a long time to recover. And lots, you know, it's one thing having theatres or concert halls, which are buildings mothballed and protected from government help or whatever to keep themselves closed for a period of time. But the people who make things happen in those buildings, that play musical instruments, that sing, that act, etc., are all freelancers. And they don't have a salary they can rely on. They haven't had furlough payments from the government. They haven't been supported in any way. And for those people, the longer this goes on, the more likely, I think, a percentage of them will simply give up. And that's a great sadness.
Right. Well, we just need to tell them all that there's big money, I think, in writing theme music now for these types of interview shows. Well, and that's a path forward.
When you do series 5, you know, you'll need a new theme tune and a new younger generation composer.
Right.
So let's audition for the next person to take over next time. Might be you, Jim. You are the producer, aren't you? Or is
Grace is producer. I'm just the talking head. Yeah.
Okay. Well, put in your contract.
Right, there you go.
You're going to do the music when it takes over to the new season.
Right.
12.
And I wanted to jump back. You mentioned some of the things you were more well known for, like Vicar of Dibley and Mr. Bean. There was I think Sid told me a story, and I want you to tell it. Is there one that kind of came to you in an odd place, like a taxi cab or something?
Well, the Vicar of Dibley did, yes. I mean, I don't know how. Have you performed My Love Divine at St. Nick's?
I think I'm sure we have. I don't know if I have since I've been there, but
yeah, I think you have. Under Sid's baton, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
At Love Divine, I actually came to me in the shower, which I think is a first time for that. That was 20 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Vicar of Dibley, what happened was I went to the BBC rehearsal rooms in West London on the Underground, and used to go there a lot at that time, 30 years ago. And to the first read-through of the Vicar of Dibley's first pilot script. And I met the people involved. I knew Richard Curtis, who was the writer, and I knew Dawn French, who was the star, and I knew the producers from other projects. And they talked about what it was going to be like and what the opening sequence would be like. And we had the usual briefing conversation about what could it be. Even then, although they were very different days to now, even then, part of the conversation is how cheaply can you do this for? Anyway, we had this conversation about who the character was. I had, heard them read the script. So anyway, I said, fine, I'll have a think about it. And I went back, and for some reason, I can't remember, I got a cab instead of the tube. Maybe it was running late. So I've got a cab back to my studio in central London. And in the cab, it just suddenly came to me that I would like to do a version of Psalm 23. And the minute I thought of that tune came into my head. And so it was then a race against time to get back to my studio before some other distraction came on. The worst thing of all would have been if the cab driver had put on the radio and played some music, because as you know, that's the thing that can drive away in your head. Anyway, he didn't. I got back to my studio and I sat down at my little organ in my studio and played that thing and sang it. At that point, it was only the first verse, really, not with the middle bit. Yea, though I walk through the night, at that point, because it was only going to be 30 seconds. So I did that, and I immediately went back out onto the Underground and took the train back to the rehearsal and said, look, I've had this idea, which I think is not what you're expecting, but please hear me out. I would like to do Psalm 23. I'd like it to be a proper choir with an organ, etc. And I sat down at the piano and played it and sang it. And I think a lot of people at this point in their position would have said this feels terribly risky because this is an actual psalm setting, and here we are in a comedy series about a vicar. They were worried, I think, about whether people would think it was aesthetically or in terms of taste, a bit odd, or they thought it'd be expensive to do with an actual choir and organ. And they panicked a bit, I think, and then said, fine, it sounds like a nice idea, it's a nice tune, give it a go. So I guess we must have recorded it with the middle bit added and all that about a week later. So it was all happened very quickly.
Wow.
And yes, it was in a cab. But the fact is that it's the Vicar of Dibley was the last thing I wrote in terms of the polished manuscript in ink on manuscript paper. And after that was the year 1993, I think it was, that I moved over to software, and everything was then printed out from there on in ever since. And I had this reflection on this idea, which is that historians of the future won't have composer manuscripts from our period.
Right.
We've had them all along, and they're beautiful things in their own right, and they're very illuminating in both senses of that word, because you can see which bits they agonized over, which words, which were things were giving them trouble, which things they cared so much about, and lots of changes and things. They're amazing documents of composers' work in progress. We won't have that now.
Yeah.
And the Vicar of Dibley was the last one that I did in ink. And in fact, a few years later, and actually quite a long time later, the Bodleian Library in Oxford were doing an exhibition of their manuscripts in their collection, which, because they've been a library for nearly 1,000 years, is quite an interesting and good collection. And so they said, is there anything you can give us? So I said, well, you could have the Vicar of Dibley. They said, oh, we'd love the Vicar of Dibley, because normal people coming to the exhibition would know what that was. They won't know what anything else is. So we went to the opening of this exhibition, and there's my copy, in ink, of the original copy of the Vicar of Dibley. And next to it, in a glass case, Handel's own manuscript of Messiah. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm very glad that I had given it to them, because I felt there's no better place for it to be than next to George Frederick in the Bodleian Library. But that's the last time I wrote something in ink.
Wow.
So it's a bit of a moment in musical history, I think, when there are one or two composers who still use manuscript, and quite a few composers do notes in pencil on manuscript before it goes on to notation. But it's a dying thing. It's going to end up all on.
I know. It's a shame, because they are truly like works of art, those original manuscripts. But I guess on the plus side, editors now won't have to agonize, like, what did he write there? Because it'll be a little more clear. Yeah,
strangely though, even now we've come to the software part of it, when I sent my pieces to Faber, my publishers, for proofreading and for printing, they come back with quite a long list of questions that are not clear. So I think probably it's just in the nature of it, isn't it? And even then, when they go through their process, I go through my proofreading, they go through theirs. even then you still find mistakes or things you didn't quite read in the score, because there's so much information in there.
Wow. Well, I promise we're going to move on from all of the TV stuff soon, but there's so many good stories here. There's one show in particular where I think you have a special relationship with the character. I'm sure there are many, but there was one that I used to watch when I was little, and that was Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean.
I think you know him, don't you?
Well, yes, I met Rowan Atkinson, who is Mr. Bean, when he wasn't any of those things. He was just another student at university. In fact, I met him and Richard Curtis, who's a well-known scriptwriter and comedy writer, on the same day, my first day at university, because I went to the Freshers' Fair, which is the rather quaint-sounding thing we have in the UK. I'm sure you call it something much more grand and exciting in American universities. But anyway, we call it the Freshers' Fair, where all the societies and clubs lay out their stall to try and entice you to come and be in the rowing club or the croquet club or whatever it is. And I went there rather thinking, I'm not quite sure what, if anything, I want to join. But I'll go along. I don't know anybody, so I went on my own. And there was a desk which had the comedy review people. And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. I don't want to do comedy, but I'd quite like to do the music for that. That sounds like a good... I imagined in my head it was a kind of stage version of a comedy sketch show like Saturday Night Live. So I thought, well, that would be something I'd quite like to do. So I said to the bloke at the desk, I've got a band and I do music and I like music. Do you need anybody to play music? And he said, well, we might do. Give us the name of your college and your room. Put it down on this piece of paper. And he asked me a few questions. He said, someone will come and see you and ask you, test. I thought that I'd have a sort of audition where I had to sort of, compose something on the spot or something. So I thought, well, fair enough. Anyway, that went quite well. And I went eventually back to my room. And later that day, the guy came round to see me. Now, the guy at the desk in the Freshers' Fair was Rowan Atkinson. And the guy who came to see me was Richard Curtis. And he came in, he breezed in, and he said, look, we're doing a comedy review show in 3 weeks' time in the Oxford Playhouse. Do you want to do the music? Now, there was no audition, no test. I mean, I could have been completely useless or mad or, had pretended I could play the piano when I couldn't. But anyway, I said yes, hurrah. And that's what I did. And that was the first show I did with those two. And then I carried on working with them from that point when I was 18 years old, ever since now. It's been a very long and close relationship. What we did originally, out of those university reviews came a touring show, which was, to start off with, it was just Rowan and Richard and myself on stage, me stuck behind a keyboard and the two of them doing all the sketches, just the two of them. And we did that, first of all, around little small venues, then it got bigger and bigger, and then we toured Australia and New Zealand and Canada. We had a character in that show, a regular character, who we called Mr. Gobbledygook, who would just, do funny things and not say anything. And that was the character that became Mr. Bean. And I can now reveal to you, Jim, that at a conversation that took place with the man who was going to produce the first TV version of Mr. Bean, we went for lunch at his place in Oxfordshire, and there was a long, long discussion about what this character could be called, because he couldn't be called Mr. Gobbledygook. And I came up with the title Mr. Bean.
Did you?
I did. I've never been paid a penny for the rights, but that was the one they chose. So then the thing went on TV, and then we carried on touring it live as Mr. Bean, and then there were Mr. Bean films, and then there were 200 Mr. Bean animated feature, small films, all of which we've done throughout our lives together. And it's been a long and rather profound relationship I have with Richard and Rowan. And I feel we're kind of a bit more like family members than we are mates.
Right.
In that way that you can go 3 months without seeing them. And then when you walk in the room, it's exactly like it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and 10 years ago. We pick up exactly where we were without any interruption. Even though life has brought us all, three of us, very, very different challenges and journeys.
Right.
Been doing all his stuff with Comic Relief and his movies, and trying to solve poverty in the world,
Right.
brilliantly so. And Rowan has done other projects and his other, stellar career. And so we've had separate lives, but always, bounce back to each other from time
Right.
to time.
That's one, you kind of speaking of life's journeys, that's one of the neatest things for me getting to know you is all of the connections that have kind of come to a head now. I used to watch Mr. Bean when I was really little at my grandmom's house when she would watch me during the day. And in my very first church job, I remember doing Psalm 23 by someone named Goodall. And so, when I came to St. Luke's.
Out of interest, Jim, did you know when you first did that Psalm 23 setting that it was from a TV program or not?
I think I may have, for two reasons. One, because it was on the top of the score, the Vicar of Dibley theme.
But did you know what that was?
I think I did actually, because I have an aunt who I would spend a couple weeks with every summer, and she loves British comedies and all that stuff. So we'd watch Fawlty Towers and Vicar of Dibley. And so I think I had just seen episodes, when I was at her house one week every summer or something like that. But yeah, it's just so
strange thought for me, Jim, that you create this stuff and it just pops up in a living room 5,000 miles away. It's
right.
a miraculous thing.
I know. Yeah, and I should say for people watching that I think you've probably traveled the farthest for this interview than anybody else, because you're not here in the States with me.
No, although I don't travel far from my home to my studio where I am now, because I can cycle in about 12 minutes.
Right. Where are you currently? Are you in England? Or are you in France? Or
we're actually now in London again. We did spend a long time in France, which was a much nice place to be during the lockdown.
Yeah.
But we're here now, and it's uncertain when we'll be able to get back to our house in France.
Sure.
Not just COVID, but the looming catastrophe and economic suicide or Brexit, which starts on the 1st of January.
Right.
And new borders are put up between us and our closest neighbour. So we were not quite sure how that's going to work out. But I have this studio, which is which is the River Thames is about 100 meters to my right here. And just further up the River Thames is our house. So I cycle along the Thames in the morning to come here and work in the quiet place.
That sounds lovely. Well, let's, since normally we start with this, but I wanted to do things a little differently with you. Tell us about your home away from home, and how did you get connected with St. Luke's, and what was sort of a culmination of that relationship so far?
Well, it's Sid really is the
always
pivot in all of this, of course, always. Now, I think, when Eternal Light was going on, when it was first being done around the place, the strange thing about being a composer is that you don't always know in advance when someone's going to perform your works. And it had quite a few performances in Europe, and we licensed various people to do a performance in the United States of Eternal Light. Now, looking back on it, we now know that Sid was the first person to do it for the choir in the United States, the American premiere, which is an amazing and lovely thing. And I think I wrote him an email saying, "This is fantastic. I wish I could be with you. It's so far away, and here you are doing my piece." There was another performance, by the way, in the United States that same day. So, but I think because your time zone was before theirs, it was a close run thing. But St. Luke's won, and I sent an email to Sid, never having met Sid, I did. Sid knows a lot of people here in the choral world, and lots. When I said to people, "There's this nice guy called Sid who's just done Eternal Light," he said, "Oh, Sid, we know Sid." A lot of people like Simon House, who's pretty much my oldest friend since childhood. He was the conductor of the London Symphony Chorus, etc., and he knew Sid, and lots of the other people knew them. Said, "Oh, yes, we know Sid." So we struck up this email type correspondence, and then there was a performance of it going to be at Carnegie Hall with an organisation called DCI-NY, who put on performances of choral works with large groups of singers from all over the place. often all over the world, not just locally. And there was going to be a performance of that in Carnegie Hall. And Sid and a number of St. Luke's choristers signed up for it. And he said, well, we're coming to New York. We're actually going to meet in person, which is a very exciting thing. And so, yes, we all went in November, I'm going to say 2018, it might have been 2017, I can't remember. We finally met in person in New York. And by now we'd had a regular correspondence, and he said, you know, what about writing a piece for us? Because we know quite a bit of your stuff, we performed quite a bit of it over the years. And so I said, well, I'd love to do that. So that's how it all began, and how we started to come, Val and I started to come actually in person to Houston, to St. Luke's. Has such an incredibly special place in my life, in our joint lives, Val and I, but also in my composing life, because it's kind of the key relationship of my maturity. You know, you have different relationships at different times in your life, working wise. For other people, it's you get a job and that's where you're working, and then you move to another job and that's where you're working, and you have your colleagues and certain things happen in your career path. But for a composer, not quite as simple as that. But there are key working relationships you do have from time to time, and I've just mentioned Rowan and Richard, which comes on and off stream from time to time. But for a long time, I was writing pieces for, and my recordings were mostly done by the Christchurch Cathedral, Oxford. Again, which came through whilst I had been at Christchurch as a student. Many years have passed since I was a student, and Stephen Darlington, who was then the musical director of Christchurch, got in touch with me and said, look, we've never met before, but why don't you come and see us? Would you write us a piece? So that began then a long relationship, a kind of 25-year relationship with them, and I did loads of things at Christchurch, and they were sort of my go-to choir. And I like to think I may have been their go-to composer, although they had one or two other quite big names, you know, lurking about. So that was a lovely relationship. So Stephen left Christchurch, retired, and Val was their manager. There were all sorts of reasons for us both to be involved in that. So that was for sort of mid-period. And in a way, you know, apart from Vicar Dibley, before, I would say in the 1980s and early 90s, I didn't really write much choral music, even though it was something I really wanted to do. Not many people had asked me. And it was because Stephen asked me to write in the Mass in 1991 or 1990 that I said, oh, I'd love to have a go. And that's when I really started to write choral music, sacred choral music in earnest. And I've written a lot since then. So that was kind of my middle bit. And now I feel as though I'm kind of getting into the mature bit. And I feel now Sid and the relationship with St. Luke's and you all is completely key. I don't think I could think of a year, leaving aside COVID and its destructive nature, I can't think of a year now that we wouldn't plan with either something happening with St. Luke's or with, you know, a piece or some relationship between music and us and whatever. And Sid has been such a champion of me and my music, not just in St. Luke's and the community of St. Luke's, but also wider in Texas, and, you know, put me in touch with all sorts of other people. He wants more Americans to know my stuff, which is a lovely thing. And he even put together that whole evening where I did a talk about the Beatles. You know, he's a fantastic champion. I think you'd agree with me, Jim, that the great, in a way, the greatest artists are the ones who recognize at some point that the next generation is the thing they have to be concentrating on. And that he is one of those people who understands the nature of how you encourage and guide, and not always praise.
Right.
You know, just praise the whole time doesn't always make you a better person, better at what you do. I mean, I think I got a lot of criticism when I was a young composer because I was out there in the public arena and getting reviewed the whole time by people being rude about me. So I think it's quite important to have that thing. And I think, you know, Sid is fair and critical, and that's a useful and constructive thing to be. He doesn't just say everything you do is great. He says, you know, what about that? And I'm sure all the choir would agree with that. He's not a rubber stamp. What he wants is people to be better at what they do, to
Sure.
ennoble their achievements and to big them up and give them opportunities. All the things great coaches do,
Right.
but also to not let you get away with something that's substandard. I think that's
Sure.
a really key thing. I'm fantastically grateful to him for his championing of my work in the States.
Yeah. I think all our choirs would agree with everything you just said, that he doesn't always praise them.
I mean,
he's
he's very nice to me, and he's always saying lovely things to me.
yeah,
But because of his own sense of high standards,
sure.
what he requires of everybody, I myself don't want to hand over something that I don't feel I have really worked very hard and thought very hard about. I think, writing pieces of music, and I'm sure writing novels and painting pictures and doing dance is exactly the same, is that it's not just, what you feel coming out. That's an important part of it. It is also, what do you think about this? What is the thought process? Why is this written for 3 bassoons and 4 organs? What's the thought process? It's not just random.
Right.
I remember Stephen Sondheim once saying to me that there's nothing accidental about good art. It's a sort of common myth that it's somehow accident. I know I've told a story about the shower, the cat, but what he means by that, I think, is that good composers and lyricists choose what they do. They are making choices the whole time. Is it that word or that word? Would this one be a better word? Is it that chord or that chord? Would chord C be even better?
Sure.
And I think what he means is, by not being accidental, is that people think incredibly hard about what they write, and the process of what it is you're churning out. There has to be a thought process. There has to be, you have to be your own editor as well as there'll be other people who edit. You've got to be your own editor. You've got to decide, well, is that really is that the finished product?
Right.
And you can use your friends and loved ones and colleagues to some extent to do that, but you must have some ability within your own brain to say, that could be better.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I always say that my biggest, not regret, but my biggest wish was that I had come to St. Luke's just a little bit sooner, because I think I missed Invictus by months.
Well,
and I know that was such a kind of key culmination in your relationship with St. Luke's.
Yes. And I hope that the relationship goes on. I hope it's not seen dropping to a closing.
Sure.
And it's one of the things is about this relationship is we're talking about it retrospectively because we're sort of summing up what's happened. But here's the fascinating thing: the day before Sid performed Eternal Light for the first time in St. Luke's, I had no contact with him and sent him an email saying good luck. Nothing about what has happened since could have been predicted.
Sure.
I mean, everything that happened, how it unfolded, Carnegie Hall, Invictus, all the other things, are all in a way a surprise and a wonderful thing. And the day before that performance, none of that was on the cards.
Right.
No timetable. It was in nobody's diary. No one expected that to happen. I didn't think that the place that would, take my music to its heart in the United States would particularly be Houston. I mean, all these things are, unknowns. Isn't that an amazing thing?
It is. It really is. Yeah. Well, moving on, because people will get angry if I don't get to it, because it's a staple of this. We always ask people, what are their 5 favorite things right now? We've had many interesting answers during this COVID time. So I'm curious, what are your 5 favorite things right now? And it can be anything, a book, a Cadbury piece of chocolate that you're enjoying lately, anything like that.
Always my favorite of things, mostly. Okay, so first of all, our daughter Daisy is pregnant, and that is an amazing new thing for us. And she was told she had a 3% chance of conceiving, and was getting very gloomy, and then miraculously did. Having, it seems a miracle. It's just wonderful. Obviously, we're nervous and don't want to, count our chickens and all that. She's at the relatively early stages, but it's going to be a new part of our life.
Wow.
And so that's the first thing. She's actually with us at the moment. Her husband is away, so she's actually living with us at the moment. And while she is sick the whole day, and all the rest of it, she's also kind of doesn't mind because this is happening. and it's an extraordinary thing to get your head around.
Sure.
Possibility of being a grandparent in April.
That's exciting.
So that's the first thing I would say at the moment.
Okay, one.
Wonderful thing. I love my daughters so much. No words can describe the depth of my love for my daughters, and to see them go through this extraordinary change life period. It's amazing. It's amazing. Everybody listening to this who's been through this will, I'm sure, echo the mind-expanding thing of the idea of the next generation.
Yeah.
Secondly, I would say France. We have this second home in France, in rural France, kind of in the middle. If you put a pin in the middle of a map of France, kind of land on our house. I love gardening, and I find it very therapeutic and very cathartic to the composing process. So I might do a few hours composing and then go and garden. And I'm not really a sort of small details gardener. I like big, heavy stuff. We've got a lot of land there, and I like planting trees, moving stuff around, I like kind of heavy-duty things. All my ancestors, with the possible exception of William Byrd, who I may be distantly related to, all of them, apart from him, were agricultural labourers.
Really?
Yeah, well, at least certainly back 200 years. In all the local censuses, it says what they died of. It says ag lab. And they just, all ag lab, agricultural labour, all farmers, all the way back. One of them says cause of death, exhaustion. So I think probably that gene, or whatever it is, that legacy is there. And they love doing kind of stuff in the garden. And that's fantastically good for my calmness, especially in times of complexity as we are living through at the moment. So that's a huge thing for us, and we love being there. And we have friends to come and stay with family, and it's a beautiful place, and it's very tranquil. It's quite a contrast from living in London, and I think that we're very, very lucky to have that thing, and that's a huge thing in our lives. It's lovely. We had such a beautiful summer there. So that's number two. Number three, because we were kind of in lockdown, really, but not proper lockdown like early in the year, but because of Daisy's condition, we now, until the baby is born, will be, not seeing anybody, not going out, not doing anything. Which means, forever, like it was for everybody during lockdown, we spend a lot of time together, and, Val and I are very happy together, and it's wonderful that we are, considering how much time we're spending together. And she cooks the most fantastic meals every day. So I look forward to that at the end of each day, coming home from the studio, whatever will be the delicious. We watch a lot of telly, by the way. And, a lot of American telly too. One of the funny things is whenever we talk to Sid and Cindy about favourite TV programs, we're always saying American things, they're always saying English things. Because we love American high quality. I think what the fact of the matter is, isn't it, Jim, that we get your best stuff and you get our and rubbish doesn't make it across the Atlantic. We do that to relax. And where have we got to? 3, or was that 4?
I don't know. I lost count.
Musically, obviously we're all in a way listening to more music, perhaps because of, we're not going out so much. And everything. I miss the idea that we can't really go to musicals, theatre, and all that. I don't listen to as much music as probably most people do recreationally, because if I'm composing something, which I am most of the time, it's a distraction from what I'm writing. So I don't tend to listen to huge amounts, but I do listen to anything my daughter Millie advises me to. She keeps me up to date with decent music coming out in pop music, and she'll send me stuff. We've got a WhatsApp group called the Music Sharing Club, and she'll send me things I've got to listen to. So I love that, and it's a way of keeping in touch with what's going on. What else do I like at the moment? I only really read on holiday. I always think the time has got to be productively used every minute of every day. And I can often think, when I really love to sit down and read a book, I think, yes, but I'll go and take the Virginia Creeper off the back wall, or whatever it is. There's always something else more urgent, or I've got to write an email or something. So when we're on holiday, I love reading, and I've got a long backlog of books to read, actually frighteningly long. I'd have a lot of holidays to catch up. So I do really like reading. I just don't do enough, I feel. And I'm probably one of those people who my favorite books generally are non-fiction. I like to know more stuff. But my favorite author of the moment is someone called Kate Atkinson. I don't know if anybody's heard of her. She wrote, her first sort of big success was a book called Behind the Scenes at the Museum. And she wrote a book which I think is my favorite book at the moment, which is Life After Life. And she plays with the idea of time, backwards and forwards, and lives, how things might have been if they'd gone a different way. I know that's a well-trodden path for fiction in general and for drama on TV and films.
Right.
She writes beautifully, and she also writes detective stories that are made into TV series, which I'm much less interested in.
Really?
She writes beautiful books about time passing and about families and things. Kate Atkinson, and the book is Life After Life, which is my favorite book at the moment.
Huh. Well, I know Sid will be very interested.
That I should have done. Is that a list?
What's that?
Have I done the correct? Have I done?
I think so. Yeah, that's a great list. I love hearing what people's favorite things are when they're just kind of stuck at home these days. And it's been interesting this year.
We very much enjoyed Anna Kendrick's series Love Life.
Oh yeah.
In the last last week, I think we watched it. Loved that. It's to some extent, I think, a bit like reading in bed. We sometimes watch TV in bed, and that's the quickest way of going to sleep.
Sure. I'm guilty of that, yeah. Well, we're drawing to a close here, and so we have a very, very important part of the show that we need to do, which is a kind of a quick way for people to learn a lot of little interesting facts about you, and that is our rapid fire round.
Yes. Al tried me out on a test for this morning.
Did she?
Said you're going to fail.
We know.
Too long.
We've had several people who have completed. We have 20 questions for everyone, and just in this last season or so, we've had
time limited.
Yeah, you have 1 minute.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Right.
So I will try to read them to you as quickly as I can, and then you're on your own.
Okay.
So are you ready?
You can do them one after another.
Oh
yes.
yeah, I'll just rapid fire.
I thought you were going to do all 20 and then lead me to it.
Right. No, we'll go one at a time. That would be fun. So, all right, I got my list here pulled up. You'll have starting my timer for 1 minute. And here we go in 3, 2, 1. Fish and chips or a burger?
Burger.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Sugar or no sugar?
No sugar.
Gin or vodka?
Vodka.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Best Beatles song?
Eleanor Rigby.
What color is your toothbrush?
Blue at the bottom, white at the top.
Drive or ride?
What does that mean?
Like in a car, do you want to drive or do you want to ride? Strings or winds?
Strings.
Hershey or Cadbury?
Cadbury.
Soccer or football?
Soccer.
Dorian or Mixolydian?
Dorian.
Narnia or Lord of the Rings?
Narnia.
Red or white?
White.
Organ or piano?
Okay, organ.
Favorite organ stop?
Quintadina.
Favorite American TV show?
That's so hard. There's so many. So I did better than I did at the practice run with Val this morning.
You got 16. That's pretty good.
I think the American show is complicated because there are so many good ones.
I know. Sorry, and that was mean of us to put that at the end. You can blame Sid for that. He helped with these.
I'm still even thinking, I'm going through a list of them in my head. I should have just said Anna Kendrick Love Life.
There you go.
It's my favorite of all time. It's just favorite of the moment.
Yeah.
And when you say red or white, it's complicated because I am actually colorblind. So
really?
It's never that clear.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, we always, as you've known from past episodes, we always end with the same question, and that is, what piece of music would you have viewers listen to after watching this? But I'm going to change yours slightly to make it two-part. So the first part of the question is, if you wanted to introduce someone to your work, and that can be anything that you've written, what would you have them listen to? And then just what is a general piece of music you might suggest people listen to?
Can I do it the other way around?
Sure.
Okay, a general piece. Look up the song Morgen by Richard Strauss.
That is Grace's favorite.
She's quite correct. I knew she had good taste. It is the most beautiful song.
Mm-hmm.
It means tomorrow, not morning, as it happens. And it's a very, very beautiful text as well by this Scottish man who went to live in Germany, who had a rather unhappy life. And despite the fact of his unhappiness, he was a gay man living in Victorian Europe, which is not a great, early 20th century, I should say, Europe, which is not a great thing. I think life was tough. But the beauty of it is that it says, tomorrow is another day, that sun will come up, and that there is light ahead and there's hope.
It's beautiful.
I mean, Strauss then sets it to the most achingly melancholy music you've ever heard in your life, which kind of implies the text is being undermined to some extent. But I can think of no more beautiful song.
Yeah.
Now that's the general piece. Christine Schaeffer, by the way, would be my chosen, other than Grace, Christine Schaeffer would be my chosen soprano recorded soloist. If you can find that on Spotify, Christine Schaeffer singing that song. Okay, so a piece of mine that might introduce my work to someone. I'm assuming they haven't heard anything.
Yeah, anything. So it can be musical, TV shows, choral, anything that you want. What is a best represent you?
Well, that's tricky.
It's tough, I know.
Okay, I'm going to give you one. It's the song "Day Follows Day" from my musical "The Hired Man."
Okay.
That's more or less. Oh no, I'm going to give you two. There's that one, which is quite obscure. The other one is the song "Nocturnes" from the musical Love Story. And it is, as well as being a song for the main character, Jenny Cavalieri, it is a song, in a sense, it's a love song to music.
Excellent.
And I'm very proud of it. And I half wrote the lyrics and fully wrote the music. And I think that would be a good introduction to my work.
Awesome. Well, we'll see if we can find some recordings of those and post them. Howard, this was so much fun. I could talk, another 2 hours with you, but then I'd miss everything else I have on my calendar today. So thank you so much for taking time. Yeah, I know people will really enjoy getting to know you a little bit better. So I hope we can see you in Texas or see you over there in the UK sometime soon.
Really keep thinking how much we miss you all. And
well,
let's cross our fingers.
Cross fingers are crossed. Well, stay in touch, which I know you will, and we will hopefully talk soon.
Yeah, love to you all.
Take care.
Thank you.